Yeah, Eric. What a great idea.
Men's hair gel for men. Um, okay, hey, it's Chris at the Modern Dad Council. Today is Friday, and we are discussing modern dads in the workplace. What kind of work ethics are we going to instill in our youth of today? Um, each of the Modern Dad Council meets to discuss important issues around parenting, relationships, and everything else in the world. So today I have with me Eric Lehman, Jay Forty, and Tommy Maloney, and anybody else that ends up joining us. But for now, that's who we have. So who wants to start off and kind of launch into the modern dad in the workplace? Because I know for me, I've really changed my definition of what work is, or what is required of me for work, and the fact that now I get to work from home and see my kids on a regular basis, that's a pretty cool thing. And it's different from my mentality a few years ago where I thought that I had to go to a job and that paid me an hourly wage. So, whose hands up? All right, I'm going to call on somebody. All right, Tommy, why don't you start us off? Boom.
Wow. Well, for me, as my wife and I, partner and build our blending the family business, I still have a day job where I do software training, and that means I travel, a lot. And for me, what I want our kids to be instilled is that you don't need like you were saying, Chris, a normal job. You don't need to have, live in cubicle land. That you have the power and you have the ability to create your own opportunities. And for example, two of the kids have their own little side businesses, and um, actually one of my good friends sells one of our products at their store, and she was asking for a new order. And so I think one of the things I like to instill with the kids is that having the ability to create your own money, and at the same time, have some integrity when you do have that normal job. And even if you hate your job, do the best you can. And at the same time, I like to set myself as a role model for our kids and say, sure, I'm working 15-hour days, and I'm not happy with what I'm doing, but at the same time, I'm grateful to have a job and grateful to be able to provide income to the family. And so, bottom line with the kids, again, I want them to have their own ideas of what a job is and have their own way of creating income because, mom and dad should not be an ATM machine 24/7.
Right, right. So teaching your kids that work ethic and how to kind of figure out on their own um, what their best fit in the world is to earn that income to pay their bills and get
Yep.
the necessities out of life, right? I think that's what I hear you saying. Jay, do you want to add on that?
Yeah, I'm sorry. I started, and then my connection left me here. Sorry, technology is not always my friend.
Right.
Um, I mean, I've spent the last 25 or so years looking at the workplace, trying to figure out what's going on with it, and have watched a big change. And I think so. We are the dads in the middle of, or at the end of a, we're still in the process of a big shift where much of today's economy is. I mean, we've shifted out of the industrial age in favor of the intellectual or um, what some people call it the service age. That's what we're in now. So what it did was it shifted what we did for work, and anytime you shift out of what you do for work, it changes everything about how you hire, who you work for, what you call work. And so we're in the process of shifting out of a make things to a provide service kind of workplace. And that one big thing that dads need to know, I think in that anyway, is that it shifted us out of a skill and experience based economy to a behavioral or attribute or talent based economy. And the reason why you need to know yourself in today's world so you can find jobs that fit you is your work needs you to think in the moment way more than it used to, which where you ran or you pulled levers or you learned a set of skills that you did in a repetitious way. Well, the repetition's gone because when you're not hiding behind machines anymore and you're face to face with customers, they want what they want, when they want it, and how they want it, and that's what business is. which means the person you hire has to be aligned to the job well enough in order to be good at it and like it. And that's the information I've shared with my kids. Today, to be successful, you need to identify what it is that you're good at and you're interested in, and find work that aligns to it so you have the opportunity to show up successful in it. That just because you've done something before doesn't mean you're good at it, and it doesn't mean you like it.
So
and because you're in front of a customer, they know it. And when you were working behind a machine, they didn't know it. So that's changed this. So part of the big discussion about why you should spend time discovering who you are and what you're good at, well, besides that it allows you to live life in a really significant way, it really helps you start to look through what's out there for work and then choose the jobs that make sense for the way that you think, because most of our jobs today are thinking jobs.
Well, that really brings me the thought of, is anyone familiar with Jacques Fresco? He has a documentary called Life by Design, and he's basically an inventor. And it really speaks to what you're talking about, Jay, because he looks at our society as damaged. Like, we're trying to live on the monetary system, so putting a monetary value, when, you know, the reason that we started down this path to begin with in the industrial age and all of that stuff was to make life easier. But all we've done is added all of this other crap because of the value that we put on money. It's kind of slowed society's progression, is basically one of the things he talks about. But so what he has done is he created these models of what society would look like if it functioned at its greatest levels. So he actually has, okay, so Jay, what you're talking about is the mental process and the work that you put in day to day as a person and as a company and things like that. And what he's done is actually built what that city would look like and how you would build a society based on everybody's talents as opposed to their monetary positioning. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and another way to explain it, I heard Seth Godin call it this way. He said we went from manpower to horsepower to brain power. So the economy we're in now, because we were in horsepower in the industrial age, we made these big machines that did all this stuff. And now we've shifted into thinking our way through it. So it just requires a different set of abilities, or it requires a different look at the abilities and a reframing of what we look at when we start to consider work. And until we make that change in our own head, then I think we misunderstand what work is today. And we keep using a yesterday solution on a today problem. Mm-hmm. And the reason why, you know, people show up in jobs that don't fit them and they're unhappy and they don't live in this big and dynamic and fulfilled way, which they could. But the biggest part of life is our work, and if we're misaligned in work, then much of our life feels like we're misaligned.
Right. Well, I really see a lot of that because being in, you know, Michigan and being in the automotive heartland, it's the automotive workers are afraid of these robots and these things that make the job easier and better, because that's taking away the jobs that they know how to do and giving a robot to do it. When if you change your thinking, instead of thinking, oh, it's taking my job, instead of, oh, now it's creating a new opportunity for me to actually do something that I'm passionate and naturally have an ability at. Yeah, right. Well, now my whole world changes, and but it takes a lot to wrap your head around that, and we haven't been raised in that way, and so we're not as open to that. Eric, what are your thoughts on all this?
Well, I'm just glad to go last on this because I think I've been challenged this whole time with the word work. You know, and as passionate as I know I am, and as I pop out of bed every morning, you know, with passion for living, you know, on a mission. I guess that when I was hearing about like our transition from like, you know, horsepower to brain power, I feel like we're also transitioning into a world, you know, based on heart power, and I feel like that's you know, and I'm just reading a lot of this stuff about, you know, how California is in this like water crisis, and you know, there are so many people who are like, oh, well, you know, desalinization is so expensive and all these different things. And like, and that's in that money model that you were talking about, Chris, is like it's not expensive. We have the technology. Let's just build the darn plants and like get ourselves some clean water and live, and kind of change the model. So I mean, how does that relate to what I want to impart with my kids, or how I want to model these things with my kids, and I'm still I'm still learning from them because they're so passionate. We're born passionate, and I guess what I want to do as a dad is to just keep on asking those questions and keep modeling my living into my own passion. And I mean, I don't even necessarily like the word monetize, because I feel like what you're saying, Chris, is like, there's a new era about to really kind of take over this old system. I mean, this old system, we already know who won. Like, we know Bill Gates and Steve Jobs, may he rest in peace, all these people, they won the old game, It's time to start a new game where collaboration replaces competition, and we can all safely and lovingly live into our passions and know that there's room for all of us. I think, I mean, I'm probably going way off the deep end here, but like, I think there's a portion of the population that feels like, if a huge crisis hits and a good number of us actually perish, then that's actually a good thing for the rest of us, because there's still this sense of scarcity that says this world is overpopulated, and I don't believe that with any cell in my body. I feel like, I mean, a friend of mine talked about this concept of a climate refugee. Like this people who are going to be moving away from California or Brazil or wherever there's not going to be water, and they're like, well, what are we going to do with the climate refugees? I mean, like, do you mean people? Like people that we love and care about? Like, are we supposed to just build an ark? And anyway, so I don't know how that answers the question about work, but I know there's a huge transition in place right now, and my job is to model love, to my kids, and some of it is getting back to the basics, like saying, live your passion and you will never work another day in your life. I mean, that quote is my driving force, so I mean, I butchered it, but I mean, that's the whole point is do what you love and you never work another day in your life.
Right. Yeah, and that's, go ahead, Jay.
Let me offer something, because maybe I can reach between where Eric is and where I think some of the world is. I think this movement out of the industrial age to today's intellectual age set us up for this really important shift to a greater awareness, that you have to be aware of who you are in order to show up to that world. So that work is part of the way that we do things, and it is the way that we earn in order to live. But what it did was it shifted our ability to bring, it shifted our ability to do things that mattered to us. So the awareness of what your greatest abilities are and your greatest interests reminds you that you should really love life as you go through it. But we have an old perspective that said there's work and then there's life. And the shift out of work is pulling levers and life is after I pull levers to work is showing up, making a profound difference in our world in a way that uses my greatest abilities. So we call it being in your greatness zone, or that great quote that Frederick Buechner says. He says, your vocation or your purpose in life is where your greatest joy meets the world's greatest need. Well, so if that's what work is, the aligning of what your greatest abilities are to a need, a challenge, or an opportunity in the world, then we should look differently at what work is. And because it came out of the industrial age where it wasn't about adding value necessarily, it was about making things we could sell and therefore we could live better based on what we bought. Now we're shifting into the realization that's not that sustainable, and it also doesn't deliver to us some kind of sustainable happiness. We get enough stuff, and how much stuff do you finally need before you realize you're throwing it all out? So as we start to talk to our kids about what work is, it is fair to say you should show up to doing something that aligns to your best abilities, because you're better, the world's better, and your ability to make a difference happens because you know more about some things than
Hmm. That's a really good point, Jay. I think you froze up. Is everybody else there, or am I frozen?
No, we're all here.
We're here.
Okay. So Jay's frozen. All right. So I'll kind of kick off where he was at. I think an example of what he's talking about is we see all of these reality shows nowadays that it's like Survivor, and they have different types of Survivor. They have these ones where like it's an apocalypse or whatever, and so here you are, you're stranded on this island or in this area. You got to figure your way, a way to survive. And so we have these reality shows, and we see these people like figure a way out to survive when they have nothing. And yeah, they get down, they're super skinny, but at the end of the show they get $1 million, and that's all cool. But I think it brings to light the fact that like we really don't need all of this crap. Like we don't need to have all of this stuff. It's not a necessity. We could survive without it, and although yeah, it's cool and it brings us value, so we have it and we want more of it, but it's not a necessity. And so I think that has kind of changed in society a little bit. I think we used to see a little bit more of like, oh, you've got to have this car, or you've got to have this fancy
I think
new.
we still have that going on, Chris. I mean, there's still huge pressure for us to be consumers, and
Absolutely. I'm just saying that I think that there's more awareness of the fact that we don't necessarily need those things to be happy.
well, I wonder if the answer to this actually comes from the other way around. Though you asked, what should dads tell their kids about work? What should kids tell their dads about work?
Mm-hmm.
What is it that they're seeing that they should throw their hands up and say, you really need to explain why you do this? And I think if we could get out of our own sense that we should be calling the shots, to we should be good observers and seeing what's meaningful and what's not meaningful. But I hear some really neat things from my kids about work, about what they do for work and the models that they still are in, and they're wondering why are they even in these.
Right.
So I think, as we try and define what could work be, I get that there's a big shift that's going on, and I like those of us that study it see it, but most everybody else is so busy doing what they have to do on a daily basis that they don't get a chance to step out and look at it and analyze it or assess it enough to say, so what do I want tomorrow to be? Seth Godin has a lot of great books, but one of the books that we insist that the college kids read is a book called Linchpin. And the tagline on Linchpin is, are you indispensable? And Godin has this great perspective, much like what Eric was talking about, that your work isn't what you do, your work is your art. That's the thing you bring to the world that no one can bring to the world in the way that you do. Now, that doesn't mean you get to just live at home in somebody's basement forever because all you're doing is art. And it isn't art, it's art like gift to the world. But that you understand and know your world well enough to know how to combine what it is that you do well to something that adds value and someone may in fact pay for you so you could then live. But it reframes what it is you do when you wake up during the course of the day and how do you deliver it.
That's a great point, Jay, that Godin makes, because it aligns with what I would call the commodification of everything, where it's sort of like the economy it's bigger than we are. There are trends and there are forces that are kind of greater than just all of the people working at whatever it is that we do. One of those forces is to squeeze down prices and to make everything cheaper to make. And in doing that, that means employing either people who get paid less or robots to create stuff instead of having people do it with their hands. So anything that can be mass produced, basically the price is going to be pushed down and down and down and down and down, and people's labor is going to be pushed out of that. That's just sort of the way the economic world works. So what Godin is saying is, to make yourself indispensable, find something that you can do, that you love to do, that no one else can do, so that pressure can never be put on you, so that you can never be squeezed out of that, because No one can give that speech that you can give. No one can write that book that you can give. No one can create that workshop that you create, or whatever it is that you do. It doesn't have to be specifically an intellectual exercise. No one can create that painting or that music or whatever it is that, or no one can give that advice in the same way that you can. So that's not only realizing your value, but protecting your value in a world where just the ability to put two pieces together or stand on an assembly line or whatever it is, the value of that is going to be shrunk and shrunk and shrunk until it doesn't exist anymore.
And so the challenge to that, Thomas, is if you don't know what that is for you, then you're completely unable to determine your path. You don't know where to land and you don't know where to go. Whereas in the past, you could have taken a job anywhere and earned some money and basically had the fundamentals of life and you made it through life. And a lot of people did that. But the world has changed now where if you're to truly show up in a significant way and do your art, add your value, find your way, enjoy your life, or deliver to the world the thing that only you can deliver, then it will require you to do some work on the kind of work that you haven't been doing, and that none of us have been doing, this self-awareness stuff and this world awareness stuff. And so this brings us to that great question that Buckminster Fuller asks, one of my favorite quotes. And he says, or asks, what is it on the planet that needs doing that I know something about that probably won't happen unless I take responsibility for it? I love that. To me, that's what work is. How are you watching the world, and how are you knowing you to know which two go together in a meaningful way? And that I think is what we should be teaching our kids, and that's what we should be teaching in school. Who are you, and what are you great at? What are you passionate about, and what matters to you? And take the blinders off and see all that there is to choose from in this big world of yours. Mm-hmm. And though we're connected, we're only connected to the same 2, 3, or 4 things over and over again. And I see that in my college class. When I ask what they watch and listen to, it's the same 3 things. Well, the world is very big, and it's in front of you, and you're plugged in and not watching any of it. How might we start to influence you about what the hot jobs are, the hot fields are? Why would you major at a college in a degree that's not going anywhere? Well, you would because you had the blinders on and you didn't realize it wasn't going anywhere. But who does that work? Well, that's up to each of us. And as parents, what are we doing to guide our kids to do that important work so that when we release them, we pass the baton and they start running the race on their own, that they have enough wisdom about who they are and what's going on in their world to find out where they fit?
I think we have to shift 2 things in our kids as parents. One is their priorities, and we have to exemplify a different set of priorities. We have to show that, having that 52-inch big screen TV or whatever it is not the most important thing in the world. It's nice to have. There's nothing wrong with having it. There's no judgment applied to having it if you can afford it, and great, and movies look better on it, whatever. But to raise kids who feel like they're somehow inadequate if they don't have that, or if they don't have the latest gadget or game or whatever it is, then you're setting them up for a life where they're just going to be chasing and chasing. But then going back to what you said, Jay, about where we really need to apply ourselves, it's teaching a different set of obligations. It's saying, for example, to a young boy, instead of your obligation is to be a provider, you got to go out and make money, you're going to be happy 2 weeks out of the year when you go on vacation, so just suck it up and forget about it. No, your obligation is to yourself to find something that you really do love to do and to go out and share that with the world in a way that resonates. So let's figure out who you are and what it is about yourself. And that's not self-indulgent. That really is your obligation to the world to do that, to solve problems out there that only you can solve.
Well, that's Frederick Buechner's line when he says your purpose or your vocation. Vocation doesn't mean your church vocation. Vocation means your role here, your place, is where your greatest joy meets the world's greatest need. And,
right.
And that's both for you and for the world. You love it, and you do something amazing. You're not great at everything, but you're amazing at some things. Know what those things are, do those, and therefore when you go and work in that way, the you who shows up will be so much more significant than the you who's in an area that doesn't suit them. And I think all of that happened when the industrial age shifted when we left that in favor of today's intellectual or service age, it required us to look in instead of looking out.
I just want to add this so that it's clear not only to you gentlemen on the council, but to the people watching this. What we're talking about isn't this like crazy idea that could be. This is something that I believe pretty much all of us are earning income doing the things that we really love and that are passionate about. Am I incorrect in saying that? So, I mean, each one of us in our own way is living that model of living the things that we're passionate about, and in doing so able to put the food on the table, the roof over our heads, and things like that.
Well, that's, as I hear you say that, Chris, again, for my wife and I, we're still, working on building this business where, we've launched, in my mind, it's a successful podcast. We've got some webinars coming up. But for the most part, like I said earlier, I'm still doing a day job. From time to time, I'll write articles and do things that I'm passionate about. But it goes back to what we're talking about originally, and that is to show our kids, no matter what age, show them that find it might take them for a long time. They might not be able to find their passion right away or where they need to be in service, but if we model that, if we show them, so for example, my wife and my son doesn't know it yet, but my wife is taking him tomorrow to a Kiwanis event where they spend most of the day helping out, be it cleaning up, be it painting. We did this a couple years ago, and my son loves to be in service, but you have to kind of push him, And I think, again, if we model what we want our kids to do, be it in service or be it at a 9-to-5 job, or teach them as best we can on how to be a solopreneur, or work in a company where you are the company's entrepreneur. Teach them there is not just one way of doing things, that there are other ways of doing things. So again, personally, I'm not happy where I am professionally. However, I'm just grateful I have a job. The employment report came out today, and everything that they said was going to happen didn't happen. We didn't add more jobs than were expected. So,
well, hold on.
I'm just grateful I have one.
Yeah, but I want to add to that, because I think that report coming out saying we don't have as many jobs as we thought we were going to have is because we're trying to revive an old system.
True.
We're trying to pump blood into an old system. The new system is kind of what Eric was talking about. The new system is you are going to find something to match with what Jay's saying, what Thomas is saying. You're going to match with what you're passionate about, what you love doing, and what people need. And you're going to give, and in that giving, other things are going to come so that you are provided for. Does that make sense? Am I on the right track?
Well, and I don't know what was said when I had a technological snafu, but what I'm really sensing is that we're all in transition. I think what I'm hearing that's still a theme is that we're working towards lifestyle design rather than job a day, work a day existences. So even if we all still have day jobs, it seems like that inspiration is coming from a different direction, and it's sort of going backwards. I feel is like, how do you want your average day to look? And none of us are saying that we don't want to show up and get sweaty. I think we're all saying that we just have a vision in mind other than trading a unit of time for a unit of money. And even, I mean, like, so, I worked at U.S. Airways for $8.50 an hour, and, no one else would look at the world the way I did, but, like, I worked for 18 weeks and I made 18 trips, and, like, it was amazing. I mean, I was the best minimum wage employee ever, or it was the best experience ever. So, I mean, I think what's really shifting, regardless of whether or not we have a paycheck or a 1099 or a profit and loss statement, is that we are designing our lifestyles differently. So I think that's, when we talk about the Protestant work ethic, I'm like, wow, I don't even know what to share with my kids about that. Like, I just want them to wake up and be passionate about something, and it's the only way I now know how to do that is to be passionate about something when I wake up. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, if anyone else has any ideas as to how, how to do that or what it means to parent into that, great. But, I mean, and we're, we all love our kids. We all want to be providers. It's just like every single definition is changing. That word work is just changing. So I think we're all interpreting that change in a totally different way without any value judgment on how any of us are doing it. But it's pretty exciting.
It is, and it really, I'm not so sure that it's not the definition of work that's changed, because work has always been about creating something of value, something that will be valued in the world, and that you can be compensated for, or receive value for in exchange. So, but I think it's what we're finding as what's valued is what's different, because in a sort of a capitalist industrial society, you worked, but you were just giving your time, and you weren't actually getting a whole lot of value in return. You were just getting some money, and the owner of the factory or whatever it was where you're working was really getting the value from the products that go out there, and then realizing that profit. And the workers are just getting like this little, bit of it, just enough to survive, in a sense. But now it's almost like everybody can be a producer of value, because you have distribution systems, primarily the internet, but you have ways of distributing your goods and your services and your words and whatever else it is that you're putting out there that aren't controlled by a small number of people who own lots of real estate or factories or tools or things like that. So we've always all been value creators. It's just that we can create so much more value personally and put it out there and get so much more of the reward for it. I mean, even if you just look at books, in a traditional publishing arrangement, the author gets a royalty in the beginning 10% and scales up to 15% of the retail price of the book. And that leaves money going to the publisher and to the bookstore, but the author's getting that little slice. If you self-publish on Amazon, you price your book above $3, you get 70% of the sale price of your book. So that's a whole different equation when you look at just one little area of creating.
Wow. I didn't know it was such a huge, such a little margin otherwise. But it makes sense to self-publish now, huh?
And well, I mean, I think there's sort of an interesting thing, because we're also in transition around our egos,
Right.
And I think that's the trade-off. That's even in the publishing, which is such a beautiful example. It's just, there are people who are like, oh, well, it's just important for me to know that a publisher chose me. And I'm like, whatever, like, give me 70%, and I want, I want to go directly to the people that I want to serve, and, kind of shake hands with everyone that wants to be in this energy whenever I, my stuff. So I mean, I feel like it still gets back to lifestyle design. There are people who just want to be known as authors, and I'm part of the National Speakers Association, and there seems to be like a formula for even getting on the and it's kind of an interesting time, because we can literally buy ourselves that ego qualification. We can find a way to buy books for everyone, and then get ourselves on this like bestseller list, and then hope that like this force. So I mean, it's just so amazing, because I think so much of this is ego driven. It's like, how are we, who wants to give us the attaboy or attawoman or whatever, that lets us know that our purpose is valid. So I think it's a great example. So thanks for showing that one.
And it goes back to another Seth Godin quote, where he talks about instead of waiting for somebody to pick you, which is essentially what you do if you send your manuscript out to a bunch of publishers, he says, pick yourself.
Right.
That's simple.
Absolutely. That leads back to that oxygen mask too, right? You do that self-work, and I don't know. For me, the oxygen mask, where that doing that self-work and all that leads to all of these things that you're talking about, because once you start living like in your greatness, it's just all these opportunities become clearer to you, and I mean, that's just how I've gotten to where I'm at, is just by meeting these people, living in my passion, and being open to opportunities, and then taking that leap of faith. And it was difficult. I've been out of my job for almost 9 months now, and like 3 months ago it got really scary there. It's like, when am I going back? It still felt like I had to go back to my job, and it's just now like really starting to set in that this is not a job. This is a lifestyle. It isn't even a career. They say, the difference between a job is you can jump from job to job to job, but once you find a career, you get into that career. Like, it isn't even a career for me. This is just a lifestyle. This is the things I love doing on a daily basis. And as the world changes, I think you'll like this, Shay, as the world changes, so will my life. So, like, there will be certain things that I'm going to do a little bit different to make my income, or to support my family, or whatever that looks like then. But
well, I think if we're trying to help our kids see what this is and help ourselves see it, then so where's the tipping point in this? Where's the starting point in rethinking what work is, in order that we do tune in and show up more significantly connected and happy to it? And to me, I think it's awareness about stopping and noticing you, and stopping and noticing your world, and that's your formula. That if you were tuned in, stopping and noticing what you're good at, what you love, what matters to you, and you happen to notice what's going on in your world, and took the time because you felt it valuable, that there is something for you to do, where is it that I should do it? To me, the other thing about this whole thing, too, is that this is an accountability formula.
That's just what I was thinking, too. I was like, yeah, go ahead.
Well, you've got to be accountable for your own work. One of the things we were trying to train the colleges in, look, you don't need to be an entrepreneur to have entrepreneurial thinking. And entrepreneurial thinkers are people who are opportunity hunters. They watch their world for the places to show up right as their best and biggest and most creative selves. So even if you're a biology major, you would still be an entrepreneur. You don't have to start a business, but you should be watching the world in a different way. So we were wondering, what is it we needed to show our kids, young adults, college kids, high school kids, about how to look at the world and how to look at themselves. And if they had that as the tipping point, the starting point, then the world opens up to them in a very different way. They could then redefine what work is for them. Where work is about, like what Thomas said, it's about adding value and making a difference. In fact, it's the exact line we use in a talent-based interview. I'm not ready to hire you unless I know how you're going to add value and make a difference here. And if I don't know what the way that you think, what you're interested in, why is it there's something here that we have that moves you, then I will have to push you every step of the way to get you to perform. I would love it if you would choose to perform. And the way that that happens best is that this job matters to you enough that you would bring your best effort to it. Well, that happens when you're aware enough that this job is for you and equally aware if this job is not for you. Don't do that. As much as, knowing this, as we talk about, how to help our kids identify what lights up for them, it's also giving them the permission that parts of things will stay dark for them. And that's okay. I give the example all the time, it's like the iPhone. The iPhone is a phone for everybody, which means there's a whole lot of things it's going to do that you don't want. So don't do them. So then when you take a look at the world, it's like the iPhone. It's here for everybody. That includes other people who don't have the same abilities that you do, but other ones. So some of it will go dark for you because the other parts light up. Know what those parts that light up are, land there, and then start to see some opportunity. Then virtually everything you look at will make sense for you, and you will start to discover where you could add value and make a difference.
Beautiful, Jay. Thomas, he's had to get going, so thanks for being on today, Thomas, and we'll see you next week. Did anybody want to follow up with what Jay was saying there? I got a little sidetracked towards the end there when Thomas was getting ready to leave. I wanted to catch him before he went, but I think, Jay, what you were saying had a lot to do with what Tommy, what you were saying about teaching your kids, like how do we set an example for our kids. And I think like right now society's at this like slight change. We're starting to make that adjustment to this new way of thinking, and eventually this will be the mainstream. And the people that are already at the cusp of all this, that are already doing these things, they will be the Coca-Colas of tomorrow's I don't know what you call it, but workplace, yeah, the way of business and the way things are done. It's all starting here. So there is no this is how you do it pathway, because everybody has their own unique way of doing it. Would you agree with that?
I think, go ahead, Eric.
Well, I guess I'm not sure that there's going to be any Coca-Colas of tomorrow. I feel like there's going to be a whole bunch more cottage industry that it just feels a whole bunch more like community, and a lot less like these big oligarchies. I think government's even going to come into question as well. And I don't want this to be like a political rampage, but I've just been listening to Marianne Williamson, who's imploring folks in the spiritual realm to like activate on a political level. And I guess it's just when I keep on hearing the oxygen mask analogy, I think the most challenging part of that is to continue to keep the mask on regardless of how other people are looking at us. And I feel like that's the biggest transition we're in right now, is that what you were saying, Chris, is like you thought you were gonna like you had this feeling you were supposed to go back to work at some point, and you're just not. Like you created a lifestyle, and so I feel like that's the model we're in, is to model to our kids, yes, put the oxygen mask on yourself, even if I look at you funny, and I think that's the interesting part as a father, because like I know I've got some pre-wiring that I get to work on myself without imposing it and projecting it onto my kids. I've got some of that stuff. It's just inherent in me. So
all of us.
That's not their job. That's my job. So I think that's what I want to get better at as a father, is to say, look, don't even use me as an example. Like even though I'm pretty darn passionate, like listen to your inner voice. Like, and I mean, my son, he is loving being a dancer, and there are people who are identifying him as an athlete in other sports and other realms, and he's like, no, I've got dance and I love dance. I mean, he'd be awesome as a quarterback or wide receiver in football, but no, he loves dance. And I'm just like, I look at him and I'm like, as much as he pushes my buttons sometimes, I gotta love it, So it's really cool to watch.
Hell yeah, that is cool. So anybody want to add to that? That was Thomas Maloney. How are you today, sir?
Good.
Good. You've been awfully quiet, and so I'm waking you up and I'm putting you on the spot. I want to get some more of your thoughts on where we're going with all of this.
Well, one of the biggest things that, and I don't want to use the word regret, even though I just used the word regret, is that not having a normal job and being able to take our kids to see, actually, I always feel like I am Chandler from Friends when they always ask him, well, what do you do? And, I want to show my kids actually what I actually do to kind of give them an idea of other opportunities. But when it comes down to, a lot of things that, all the guys were saying today is, as a dad, let our kids fail. If they find something, let them fail. Be able to help them pick themselves up. But, even if they find something they think they're passionate about, I mean, heck, I was a sports medicine major in college, then realized I can't dissect without throwing up. So I ended up becoming a communications major, where I found out, my passion was radio. I loved that aspect of it. So, yeah, I spent a lot of time outside a university trying to get some air after cats were put in front of me. But then the light bulb came on, and I found a different path. And because of that path led me to other things. And so, let our kids fail. Show them other opportunities. The one thing I want our kids to learn is how to create their own businesses, be it a lemonade stand, be it a paracord bracelet making business, things like that. So again, as a dad, it's just, one of those things that we need to guide our kids. Now, I'm not saying push them in different directions, in directions they're not comfortable with, but sometimes that's a good thing. Get us out of our comfort zone, get our kids out of the comfort zone. And that's why I said my son is going to go volunteer. In my world, he's volunteering tomorrow because I want him to see other opportunities. I want him to understand about being in service and being there to help other people, besides himself. And that's all I got.
Awesome.
I think, Tommy, it's this fine line that we as parents are vested in the outcome of our kids, but at the same time, how do we release them to...
Nope. Well, we didn't want...
Jay was saying...
Sorry, I left you and then I just came back.
No, it's okay. Do you know what you were saying?
Yeah, it was... the biggest thing I wanted to share here, but to see if I can do it before it shuts down one more time on me, is that our job as parents, I think, anyway, is to open the world up to our kids to let them try things. Mm-hmm. And we can push them a little bit so that they can bump into something they wouldn't normally bump into. It's the broccoli story. If you don't know you like it unless you've tried it. So you don't know if service is for you unless you at least do that. So I think there are buckets of things that we need to expose our kids to. And then we need to be really vigilant and watch. What's the response when they go through it? Does something light up for them that we could help them see or encourage greater things in it, so that going forward, they have a better understanding of what's for them and what's not for them. And I also deal with a lot of parents who have already scripted out what their kids' lives are supposed to be, and I find those kids have very little happiness. because it's so much more important to some parents that a kid goes to college so that your friends are impressed with the fact that you have an unhappy kid going to Harvard versus a happy kid going to some other school, or not even going to school but living a life that they dream about. But for some reason that's not as valuable as the specific field that makes you as a parent look good. So, how do we then step away and let our kids be the owners of their own life, and let's help them experience what it is, watch to see what it is, and be proud of whoever they show up to be instead of who we think they have to be.
Mm-hmm.
Particularly about work.
Mm-hmm. Well, yeah, that brings me to that thought process around, so we have what programs or what classes or what things are they learning in school about, that the whole education system. So that kind of brings me to next week's topic. Next week we're going to be talking, I have a principal of my daughter's elementary school is going to come on and talk about Common Core. And so then, Jay, this will give us an opportunity to kind of talk to him about, what's the public school education system doing about teaching our kids how to live, in their greatness or to find their true talents that might not necessarily be based around what we have structured, mathematics, arithmetic, and whatever the other one is. Reading, writing, and arithmetic. Yeah, there we go. Because that got me thinking when you were talking, Jay. It got me thinking about these kids that, and I know you all know who I'm talking about. There's that kid in school, guy. There were some that were guys, some that were girls. That's their whole life revolved around doing really well in school and getting all A's, and they were in all the honors classes, and that was what their primary. You were that one of those kids, Eric?
Yeah, and I don't even some of it. I think was imposed, and some of it was chosen. And I think that was where I was getting the attaboys, and I, and that's why I'm so excited about what Dan, my friend, in terms of character building, because I don't want to raise my kids, in a way that they do things so that I'm proud of them. I want to tell them that I'm happy for them, but I don't want to say I'm really proud of you and I'm gonna write this in the holiday letter, and let the world know. What I want to write in the holiday letter and everything else is that I've got 3 happy kids who are loving every minute of their day, and that's why I'm, I don't know if y'all have kids in the competitive arts, but I'm still in this inquiry around competitive dance. As much as I know that they love dance, I'm kind of, out of the energy of them going to dance competitions, because I'm I just want them to come out of these years of dance loving dance, not saying, oh, I lost that competition by .02 points, because some judge didn't like, modern dance or our uniforms or our costumes or whatever, and I want them to just have a love for things. So yeah, I was one of those kids, but I also, woke up and said, no, I don't care about anyone's attaboy. Back to that analogy of the, the face mask, the oxygen mask is I'm gonna put this on. I'm gonna, there's this quote that I love about, from the founder of, I think, Methodist tradition, and he says, and I butcher most quotes, but he's I just go to places and I light myself on fire, and I know that people come to watch me burn, and I feel that's what I'm here to do, and the more that I get to live into that and model that, the better I know I'm doing as a dad. So right. I think that's really what it's about. So I don't know if that was,
No, absolutely, because that speaks right to that fact that how that oxygen mask has that effect in all areas of your life, and it broadens outside of you without you consciously making that effort. I just found the more I did my self-work, like you said, people are going to come, and that fire's going to catch, and it's going to spread, and the more you surround yourself with people that are doing those things and living in that sense, it's like, some part of me is like, I should become a hippie. I feel so. Yeah, I feel so hippy dippy sometimes.
Yeah, they just look different nowadays.
Right.
Tie dye.
Right. Or dreads.
Or dreads.
My kids still call me hippie. You know, like
hippie dad.
That's like, I'm like, yeah, right on.
Thank you.
Right. So, all right. I want to thank you guys for joining us here at the Modern Dad Council, where we share dad wisdom that's worth talking about. So next week, like I said, we're going to be talking about Common Core. I've got Alex Chapman, the principal of my daughter's elementary school, going to be on. I'm trying to coax my girlfriend to be on too. She is a kindergarten teacher that teaches Common Core, and she loves it. So I thought it'd be cool if we had her as a teacher that's living it, the principal that is overseeing a school with it, and then all of our opinions of it. So join us next week. It should be a pretty interesting show. I'm hoping everything stays peaceful.
Yeah.
All hippie-like. So, thanks a lot, everybody.
Thank you. Great job.